welcome to the Earth Feels podcast.
I'm Rose.
And I'm Christine.
Welcome to Earth Feels, the podcast for people feeling overwhelmed by the endlessly gloomy climate news.
Where every week we have soul-based conversations about climate change and explore the idea that climate change may be happening for us as much as it is happening to us.
If you are ready to shift your focus and secure the future for our kids and our grandkids, then this is the podcast for you.
And yes, we do know how to spell. Hello and welcome to the Earth Feels podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's Christine here. Rose, my partner in crime, is off on her bucket list vacation in Greece, and I'm wishing her safe travels as she passes through Turkey on her way home, because right now that is not a safe place in the world. So, what to do when I'm on my own? What I thought we could do today is I would get a bit of a jump start on a sister podcast that Rose and I have been talking about getting started, where we curate the best of the articles and blogs about climate change on the internet, and we read them for you. So it would be a shorter podcast and more frequent podcast than Earth Feels. And what a perfect way, I thought, to spend some time while Rose is away, rather than talking to myself for half an hour. I thought I'd seek out some of the best articles that I'd read this week and share them with you. So the first article that I want to read, it's written by Joanne Light. She is a member of Citizens Climate Lobby in Halifax. And this article was published on October 3rd on the Chronicle Herald website. The Chronicle Herald is a newspaper based out of Halifax. The title of the article is "Stonewalling on Climate Has Led to Bridge Blocking." Who was it who said we must build bridges and not walls? What about a wall on a bridge? Such a wall, made up of citizens, will be assembled on the Angus L. MacDonald Bridge in Halifax as an act of peaceful civil disobedience beginning this coming Monday. Whom will it block? Fellow citizens on their way to where they need to go. Was this action decided on lightly? No. Nor was Gandhi's decision to engage in acts of civil disobedience to free India, a comparison drawn by Ruth Gamberg in her October 2nd counterpoint entitled Greta, Gandhi, and the Media That Were MIA. I believe that it is with heavier hearts than anyone can imagine that these people will stand shoulder to shoulder as human bricks in a wall of protest to pressure authorities for a war-level effort to tackle the climate crisis. There is no choice but to engage in building such a wall. Your October 2nd editorial, entitled A Bridge Disruption Too Far, and letters to the editor of a similar slant in the same edition couldn't disagree more. But I have to tell you that, as a volunteer climate activist and lobbyist for the last 8 years, I have encountered faith, business, civic and political leaders and representatives at all levels of government on the climate crisis. I have spent hundreds of hours penning and sending letters, reports, articles, op-eds, postcards, petitions to those in power. I have spent money and expended energy pleading, reasoning, cajoling in meetings. I have attended demonstrations, marches, wending my way all over the province and lobbying on Parliament Hill. And I have only ever received a token response, when it was politically beneficial, that is, not for moral reasons. That's why this type of action is necessary. A restructuring of our economy is not even on the drawing board, despite the pressing need for reform. Now, children have joined scientists, activists, and a much wider range of citizens, many walking their first mile to protest, in acts of peaceful civil disobedience. So yes, 1,000 times yes, we must take things to the next level. But many are throwing bricks of critical commentary saying this protest will backfire. I say there is only one fire, the one consuming the planet. Don't kill the messengers. They are the harbingers of something 1,000,000 times more severe than being inconvenienced by a detour. These people are willing to face arrest and criminal records and are putting their physical safety on the line for all of us. As Gamberg wrote, millions of young people are justifiably angry that we adults have allowed this to become a crisis when we should have acted decades ago. It took the fear and anger of children to get us and the media to finally pay attention. Extinction Rebellion Nova Scotia has announced its bridge blocking action ahead of time, and anyone in an emergency situation can be led through by police escort. Question your motives for getting all fired up at the protesters. Perhaps you feel guilty for not doing enough or anything at all. Maybe it's time to step up. Maybe a walk on a bridge is in order. And that, again, was written by Joanne Light of Halifax, who is a group leader for Citizens Climate Lobby, and it was published in the chronicleherald.ca, and we will have a link on our website. Maybe some of you are not familiar with Extinction Rebellion. It's something a name I first heard not quite a year ago. But the Extinction Rebellion movement is definitely gaining momentum worldwide. Just this week, they were banned by the police from protesting in London. Now, the group has gone to court to protest this ban as an infringement on their right to protest. But what exactly do they do? Maybe you've heard about them blocking bridges that's what they were doing in Halifax and other places around Nova Scotia a few weeks ago. Certainly they've blocked bridges in London. They've stopped traffic. They've held die-ins, nurse-ins with nursing mothers. Just today, I believe, they led a protest in front of Google-owned YouTube's offices in London, again because of the support. Even though Google has been on record as wanting action on climate change, there is evidence that, well, certainly YouTube is a platform for people who deny climate change is an issue. And so that just happened today. So Extinction Rebellion, I got this off of the website, started in the UK. It's an international apolitical network using nonviolent direct action to persuade governments to act justly on the climate and ecological emergency. In the UK, and I believe it's the same in Canada, they have 3 demands. The first one is that the government tell the truth about the climate emergency. The second one is that the governments act now. And the third demand is that it is beyond politics and that there should be a citizens' assembly initiated to address this climate emergency. And so I'm going to also read an article published in the same website by somebody from Extinction Rebellion, Nova Scotia. Her name is Lisa Strickland Clark, published 2 days later after Joanne Light's letter. So this letter of the week was published on October 5th in the chronicleherald.ca, and it's entitled, "We're Going Over the Climate Cliff." What will it take? Years ago, I was traveling through Bolivia with my husband. For this particular stage of the journey, we needed to take a road through the mountains. Reading the guidebook, I was staggered to see that there were 26 fatal accidents on buses taking that route every year. That was one fatal accident every 2 weeks. A bus full of people hurtling over the edge of the mountain once every 2 weeks. Despite the significant pressure of going against the flow, I told my husband there was no way I was going on that bus, and we decided to take a much longer route. Today, we are all on that bus, metaphorically speaking. The climate crisis is here. Our current industrial and agricultural policies put us on course for 3 to 5 degrees of heating by the end of the century. That is not my opinion. That's the report of the UN World Meteorological Organization published last year. If that doesn't seem like much, try turning up the thermostat in your house by 3 degrees for a day or so and see how that feels. Humans cannot survive in an environment with 4 degrees of planetary heating. That is what's expected within the next 80 years. We now know that since becoming alerted to the fact that we need to reduce our CO2 emissions in 1990, emissions have increased by 60%. So we also now know that our governments are not going to fix the problem. They are still burning coal and building pipelines, addicted to the notion that this is, quote, good for the economy, and lacking the vision to make the necessary changes. Current environmental platforms from all the parties are inadequate to address the problem. Since November, when the IPCC report stated we have 12 years to solve this crisis, I have been honored to work with a brave group of people who believe it is their duty to take action. Extinction Rebellion has been called revolutionary, edgy, militant, hardcore. I do not believe it is particularly hardcore or edgy to want to survive or to want governments to stop investing in policies that will literally kill us all. As years of petitions, letter writing, voting, and campaigning have clearly failed, this international group is engaging in non-violent civil disobedience in an attempt to force governments to do what is required to transform our economy to a system which is based on clean, sustainable, just policies, ensuring a future that is livable for all. As I look around, I'm constantly amazed that, in general, we are carrying on as normal, and I wonder how many of us would have actually got on that bus in Bolivia when there was another option. At what point will we decide that we cannot continue as normal, start to go against the flow, and take decisive action to hold our governments to account? What will it take? It's not going to come from anywhere else, but from each and every one of us. What will it take? That is written by Lisa Strickland Clark from Extinction Rebellion, Nova Scotia. And now, what is the good news for today? Well, the good news is that after our podcast about the Greta effect, Greta Thunberg has continued her travels around North America, and one of the highlights was early in October when she visited the Standing Rock Sioux Nation in South Dakota. Now, Standing Rock, you may or may not remember, was in the news several years ago for their opposition to the Dakota Access Pipeline that was being built to transport oil from the North Dakota back in oil fields, and it was a threat to their traditional territory, to clean water. And so that's what they were in the news for. There's also a very strong response, violent response from the company and from the government. So that also made news headlines. It was quite horrific. One of the people that came to prominence in that movement in 2016, she was 12 at the time, is somebody called Dakota Iron Eyes. And so Greta and Dakota met in September, I believe, in Washington, and Dakota invited Greta to visit her in Standing Rock. And so Greta did that early in October. And the videos are quite moving of Greta and Dakota, of the crowds that came out, and the two young women addressing them and standing up for a future with clean water and a stable climate for all of us. So that is very inspiring. And before she left, Greta was given a Lakota name by the tribe, and it is translated as woman who came from heaven. And I don't know if you remember in our discussion, Rose referred to Greta as an angel who's walking among us, doing exactly what needs to be done to bring this issue of climate change to wide public attention, and we're all grateful that she's doing that. So that is the good news for today. And what is an action step that you can take? Well, I would suggest, if you're not familiar with the Extinction Rebellion, to look them up. See if anything that they're doing resonates with you. It's all nonviolent. It's civil disobedience, not uncivil disobedience. And so see if that resonates with you, and see if there's any chapters that are meeting in your area, or if you're interested in starting one. I have to say, I've not been involved with an Extinction Rebellion protest, but I'm certainly going to be tracking it and judging when it feels appropriate for me to engage in that. I think they're doing really important work. I know just today, George Monbiot, a British journalist and someone who's been writing about and concerned about climate change for years, was arrested in England. And of course, Jane Fonda was arrested in this week, and she plans on continuing to get arrested every Friday to bring attention to the climate crisis. So I would put that under good news as well. Greta Thunberg visiting Standing Rock First Nation in South Dakota, recognizing their stand against the oil pipeline that was eventually built, and also Jane Fonda, bless her heart, getting arrested on last Friday to bring attention to the climate crisis. And she says she's going to do it every Friday that she's able to. That's the good news. That is what action you can take, is to look up Extinction Rebellion and see if it resonates with you, and just get better informed about what they're doing. And my sanity tip for today is, because we are living in difficult times, and sometimes it gets to be too much. I know I've had a lot on my plate in the last couple of weeks, which up until just a few days ago, it felt pretty overwhelming. There was a lot to do, and I don't know about any of you if that ever happens to you. But sometimes there's just a lot going on and it can feel overwhelming. And so there's ways that I cope with it. Again, I have a wellness practice where I do something called emotional freedom technique, or tapping, which is a wonderful mind-body tool, and something that I'm going to put up a video on in the next week that you can tap along with, just to help decrease stress in general over the climate emergency. That's something I would love to do, and I'm going to focus on doing that hopefully in the next couple of days. But if you've tried tapping and it doesn't work, or if you're just not a tapper, it's not something you're comfortable with, a sanity tip might be getting into your car, hopefully your electric car, or somewhere else where you're not going to disturb your neighbors or the other members of your household. So drive into an isolated spot in your car if you can, roll up the windows, and just set your timer on your phone for 3 minutes, and just holler your head off. Scream, swear, do what you have to do. Just let it all out. Just no holds barred. Do that for 3 minutes. If you don't have a car, as I said, scream into a big pillow, close the door to your room and scream into a big pillow, and just let it all out. And when you're done, sit back, take a big breath, relax, and notice how your body feels. Sometimes that's just what it comes to, just letting it out and getting your body and your nervous system back to a point where it feels some release. And where you feel some release and you're ready to, again, pick up the pace of everyday life. So I hope that helps. I'll end with a quote. So it's a quote that's often attributed to Augustine of Hippo, but there's some question about that. But I like it, and so I'm just going to put it out there as question mark anonymous. The quote is, "Hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they don't have to remain as they are." So with that thought, I will say goodbye and hopefully catch you next week on the Earth Feels podcast. And don't forget to check out our new sister podcast, Best in Climate, which you had a little bit of a glimpse of today. Bye-bye.
That's this week's episode of Earth Feels. Special thanks to singer-songwriter Kristen Hoffman for generously allowing us to use Song for the Ocean. Thanks for listening.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play so you don't miss an episode. Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Children of the earth, I'm calling out. There's a mission for you and for me. You see, your mother, she has been suffering, and the truth is told beneath the